Your brothers and sisters gathered at the foot of the cross of Jesus, our Savior. The mouth speaks what the heart is full of. That's what Jesus said early on in the Gospel of Luke. Luke recorded one of Jesus' sermons. The mouth speaks what the heart is full of. And throughout that sermon, Jesus shows that just like a tree is just a brown blob until you see what kind of leaves it bears, what kinds of blossoms it has, what kind of fruit it bears, then you know what kind of tree it is. Just like the contents of a cup become obvious to you when they bubble up and spill over, it's the same way with the human heart. That we can't help but spill out what we are full of, and you can tell what we are full of by what comes out of our mouths. This whole week we've been journeying toward the cross, and we've heard a lot of talk. What can we observe about where people's hearts are at by what we've heard them say? Judas, with his words, signed a contract to betray his innocent Savior, his teacher, his friend. What does that show about where his heart is at? Peter used very strong language to deny the fact that he could ever be found anywhere else other than right at the side of his Lord and friend, Jesus. And then just moments later, he used just as strong of language to deny before strangers that he ever knew the guy. Herod used his words to mock and subjugate Jesus. Oh, you think you're a king? He made fun of him. And then Jesus appeared before Pilate, and Pilate, with his words, he held the scales of justice. He held the power to be able to acquit or condemn Jesus. He voiced a little bit of protest. He was uncomfortable with the fact that he was holding trial over Jesus, but finally he gave in, and he used his words to condemn whom he knew to be an innocent man to his death. What does that say about the human heart? Does it not say that the human heart is capable of being so filled with diabolical levels of greed and disdain and disregard for innocent human life, just like Judas's was? Does that not say that the human heart is filled with anxiety and fickleness, and in one moment can be declaring the strongest faith in God ever, but in the next moment be denying the very truth of knowing him at all, like Peter? Does that not say that the human heart can be so overflowingly concerned with the politics of a situation, with how it appears to other people, that it could even pass by and disregard human life like Pilate did? When Jesus said that, out of the fullness of the heart the mouth speaks, didn't he show that he is centuries, millennia ahead of science and psychology? He knows our hearts better than we know ourselves. He knows about how often we can see past the facades that we're trying to put up, and how our own words can betray this too. We know that somebody can be trying to be humble, but every once in a while we'll catch them say something that is incredibly arrogant. Jesus knows that people can be trying to put forth a facade of safety, of security, of mental health, of being an impenetrable fortress. But every once in a while, if you're listening, you can tell that they're not okay on the inside and that they are waging a battle that they don't want to talk about. See, we can catch each other in each other's words every once in a while. And if somebody were following you and me around and were writing down everything that we said in our whole entire lives, they would certainly catch us in our own hypocrisy. How we appear before God and we confess our faith in Him, and yet we live and we say things that contradict the very faith we declare. How we say that we trust in God in one moment, and yet in the next moment we act like, or we talk like, we care a lot more about what other people think. Or we say that God is all-sufficient and that we confide in Him and that we find protection in Him, and yet we do things and say things that betray that we're scared. We're scared for ourselves, and that's what drives us to run into all sorts of temptations to try to find security and pleasure in any other way other than God. If anyone followed us around, they would certainly catch us in our own duplicity, in our own hypocrisy. They would see what our hearts are full of, but nobody's going to do that because everyone else is fighting the same battle. Everyone else is just too distracted, trying to put up the same facade, trying to project the same character, trying to convince the world. So they don't have the time or the energy to watch you, but Jesus sees. Jesus doesn't need to wait for you to open your mouth to see what your heart is full of. Jesus already knows how you have struggled to understand, struggled to trust in the very things that he has said to you. How often you struggle to take God's will as good, and how often you and I don't even struggle against sin and temptation. We just do it without putting up a second fight. He understands. He knows. He sees that all. He knows you better than you know yourself. He knew Judas would betray him. He knew Peter would deny him. He knew that Pilate would condemn him, and he knew that I would abandon him day after day and struggle to live my faith for even 1 second. And so on Good Friday, for Good Friday worship, we come and we gather at the foot of the cross, and we already understand that we're depraved, that we're sinful, that we don't deserve God's goodness, that we don't deserve God's love. But tonight, the goal of this worship service is to take that stethoscope and put it on Jesus. Because out of the fullness of the heart, the mouth speaks. So as we listen to the 7 words from the cross, they undoubtedly show us what Jesus' heart is full of. And maybe it's worth pointing out, first of all, what we aren't going to hear Jesus say. This week, what we haven't heard what Jesus has said. Because when Judas betrayed him, what did Jesus not say? He didn't scream at Judas and say, I hate you. How could you do this to me after all the times I've hugged you and taught you and fed you and given you everything that I have? This is how you repay me. No, that's not what Jesus said. What did he say? He gently, kindly, lovingly warned Judas not to betray him. Then when Judas did it anyway, he silently accepted Judas's actions, without retaliation, without protest, and certainly without hatred. When Peter denied Jesus, and Jesus saw it, he was within earshot, he could hear it happen just as he predicted, how did Jesus respond? He didn't breathe a word of denying Peter. When Jesus stood before Pontius Pilate, and he knew what the verdict was going to be, how did Jesus respond? He didn't plead his case. He didn't assert his innocence. He didn't try to get out of the condemnation he knew was coming. Even though he had the best case in the world, he had committed no crime whatsoever. And the people were accusing him of things. They were lying, and he could have shown that they were lying very easily, and yet Jesus, he kept his mouth shut. Why? Because there was no room left in Jesus' heart. There was no room in Jesus' heart to answer his mockers with hatred and anger and vengeance. There was no room in Jesus' heart to protest and to try to get out of it, because Jesus' heart is full, as you'll hear, of something else. Jesus' heart is overflowing with something completely different and leaves no room for hatred or anger or vengeance. Just take the first word that we're going to hear, for example. When all these people are pelting Jesus with mockery and blasphemy, and they're just reveling, they're eating up the fact that Jesus said he was somebody and now he's humiliated, how does Jesus respond? With an intercessory prayer, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing, even as the nails are driven into his hands. Jesus' heart is not filled with anger and vengeance against these people who are making fun of him in his most humiliating moment, but his heart is full of forgiving love for them. We gather at the foot of the cross, brothers and sisters, to see that Jesus' heart is full of forgiving love for you. He knows what your heart is full of. He knows that you're full of temptation and anxiety and insecurity and fear. And how does he respond to that? He knows that you get in your own way, that if you could trust him as you should, that a lot of your problems would go away, that you are often your own worst enemy. And how does he respond to knowing that? With forgiving love, an unstoppable, unfathomable grace Jesus was never going to try to get out of going to that cross, because Jesus' heart is full of determination to go to that cross for you and to suffer the condemnation that you deserve, to be the salvation that you need. That's what Jesus' heart is full of. It's full of love for you. I hope that you hear it. Because when we hold the stethoscope up to Jesus' heart and listen to the words that he says from the cross, we hear his heartbeat. We hear that heartbeat stop as he fully, completely dies on that cross. But Jesus does something we've never heard of, never imagined before, that somehow, some way, even though he is fully dead on the cross, his love for you doesn't stop. It is an unstoppable, determined, eternal kind of love. And to prove it, we only need to look at the second word that he says from the cross. Because while he's on the cross, there's this criminal next to him who suddenly has woken up from his ignorance and his rejection of Christ. And he looks at Jesus and he says, and he sees Jesus for who he is. He sees Jesus for a king with a kingdom that must be eternal, because he confesses that he understands that Jesus, even after his death, is going to his kingdom. And so he says, Jesus, can you just remember me when you go into your kingdom? Jesus, can you just have me on your mind after you die and go back to where you come from? Jesus, can you just think about me when you go to your kingdom? And what does Jesus say in response? Today I tell you, you will be with me in paradise. As if to say, remember you? My brother, I'm on this cross for you. Think about you, have you on my mind when I go to my kingdom, when I go back to paradise. My brother, I'm on this cross so that you can come with me into paradise. And does he not say the same thing to you and me? Jesus looks at you from the cross and he says to you, I'm doing this for you. I chose this because of you. I want to do this so that I can save you. That's what his heart is full of, brothers and sisters. And so from now on, every time you hear Jesus' voice, hear that heartbeat. Hear the heartbeat of forgiving, wonderful, unstoppable, eternal, gracious love for you.